Thousands of great people like Bertrand Russell, Woody Allen, Stephen Hawking, Clint Eastwood, and so many others have already talked about why they do not believe in Christianity. Now, I say I do not believe, so I have to explain to you what are the reasons. Well, was born in an ordinary family and I was brought up in the Catholic traditions, in the rituals, beliefs, and I was taught that Jesus Christ came to redeem us and redeemed us from our sins, and now we are eligible to reach heaven. I was sent to the seminary later where I studied philosophy, theology, and religions. I also had the opportunity there to read books about Jesus written by philosophers, atheists, theists, Jews, and scholastic or Catholic philosophers. After reading all these, I felt that most of them had the opinion that Jesus was fashioned after the then mythical gods like Horus, Osiris, Dionysus, Mithra, and many others. They felt the real person as described in the gospel never lived. It could be that Joshua, a person by name Joshua, lived and he was an ordinary Jewish rabbi who was a righteous guy who went about speaking for Yahweh, asking people to mend their ways and go after the God. And he ridiculed the hypocrisy of Jewish scribes and the Pharisees who conspired to kill him, and they forced Pontius Pilate to crucify the poor Joshua. When he was crucified, a lot of stories started coming in, like the other mythical gods, that he ascended to heaven. It was all very simple for these, evangelists to put in that story. We will see it now, because most of these four gospels were accepted by the Catholic Church in synods of 4th century. There were a number of gospels at that time, a number of books written about this Yeshua, describing that he was married, he had children, he was an ordinary person, this, that. Gospel of Bartholomew, Gospel of Thomas, so many gospels were available. But the synods only selected these four which actually suited their purpose. They pictured him as God, they did miracles and this, that, and they burned the rest. So in these four gospels, that is only, let's say, books which tell about him. There is no historical evidence, there is no archaeological evidence, no evidence at all. And historians generally do not agree that a person by name, Jesus, as described in the Gospels, ever lived. Anyway, if we accept that a person or a God man lived and he came to redeem us, humans, what was the sin from which he wanted to redeem us? The original sin, the eating of an apple or a fruit, forbidden fruit by God? That could have been easily forgotten by that loving God. But he did not do that. He burst into anger. He gave the first parents all trouble. He brought in death, suffering. He roasted their souls in hell. Still he was not mitigated. So he made the entire descendants get birth in sin because of that small disobedience. But again, he makes a grandiose plan to redeem humankind from that, simple disobedience by sending his son, and then he has to suffer and die an ignominious death. What more a foolish story can we ever hear about in the world? This is foolish. But anyway, accepting that theory, because this is given in the whole books of Bible, we shall go one by one. As we said, this guy had been fashioned after the mythical gods. So mythical gods, this Osiris, Horus, Dionysus and Mithra, they were all born of immaculate birth. They were born, they ascended to heaven, they did a lot of miracles, they resurrected. And they did, redeem people out of their sins. So, these evangelists were careful to see that all these things happen in the life of Jesus too. So they bring in The story of Mary, a simple lady to whom an angel appears. The story goes like that. The angel appears to her and says that you will be pregnant with God and you will give birth to a baby. And naturally that baby becomes of immaculate birth. This child is to be born in Bethlehem, because most of the Jewish belief at that time was about a great Redeemer. Jewish people were under the, let's say, subjugation of Rome and Babylonian. They were in captivity. So they were going away from Yahweh, the tribal God. So the prophets of Yahweh prophesied. So they wanted to keep up the faith. So they prophesied about a mighty king who would come to redeem them. So this prophecies about a mighty king, had to be fulfilled in this poor, simple Yeshua. So we see that he was given birth in Bethlehem. For that, Mary, who was fully pregnant, and Joseph had to travel 2 provinces to take part in a Roman census in which the woman had not to go. But she went, because the child had to be born in Bethlehem, the town of, or the city of David. There, in a manger only he gets birth, and the shepherds and kings and all come there, and they recognize him like these mythical gods. And they sing praises to God. But nowhere else do we see that in his whole childhood, nobody recognizes him as a God. And he grows up like an ordinary child, as an apprentice to his father Joseph Carpenter, only until his public life begins. Then as a child, again, Herod orders all the children below 2 to be massacred, because there is a story like in Krishna where Kamsa orders the massacre of children. They draw a parallel with Lord Krishna, and Krishna's father took to flight, and here Joseph and Mary takes to flight. These are all stories made to resemble another Lord. And when he was again a little more than a child, he was missing when his parents took him to a temple, and the parents were searching for him frantically, and they found him, let's say, having a discourse with the, priest, Leonard priest, like Buddha did. Again, Buddha, another, great person. So they wanted to draw a parallel with Buddha. There are more than 120 parallels with Lord Krishna in the whole entire narration of the 4 Gospels. And when he went to a marriage party at 12, he converted water into wine as per the request of his mother, like Lord Dionysus had done. So his miracles begin. And then he starts his public life at 30, and then a line of miracles. Who were to question these evangelists? They can write anything. All the 4 Gospels were written far away from the plain scene of action. Nazareth or Jerusalem, they were not, the places where Gospels were written. Gospels were written. One Mark did write his Gospel in 70 AD in Rome. Let's say Luke and John wrote their Gospels in Asia Minor or Ephesus in about 90 to 120 AD. And Matthew wrote his Gospel in Antioch in about 80 to 85 AD. These are all faraway places. And they were all wrote in Greek, which had nothing to do with the language this poor Yeshua and these ignorant disciples knew Aramaic. So they were written faraway places in Greek, a language they did not know, not by disciples, but by somebody, unknown authors, who wanted to project him as God. So whatever is written there, we do not know even one word or one deed as done by Yeshua. They wrote on their own, whatever that came to their mind, drawing parallels from other gods. Now we see after his death, again they bring in a story of resurrection, where it's very easy. Some women disciples, when they stormed to anoint the body, they find that the body was not there. And then they bring in a story that there was apparition of Yeshua to some of the disciples, so resurrection gets established. A mere storytelling, but that becomes the foundation of a very large theory or the foundation of a big religion. So he ascended to heaven and people started believing in him. Now, before he went to heaven, there is also a belief that he established a church. Now, if he established a church, there must be some divinity in that church. But we don't find anything. As soon as the Roman Empire accepted Christianity as its official religion, they started persecuting. They persecuted Gentiles, they persecuted the Jews for 2,000 years. There were crusades with Muslims in which so many Muslims got killed. There were Inquisition courts where people who were not accepting even the foolishness of the Catholic Church were done away with. They were thrown into burning oil. They were thrown into the dens of hungry lions. Or they were persecuted in Torpedo where limbs were separated. Even older women were termed as witches and burned. All cruelties. We find the history of church, a history of cruelty, history of, let's say, all sorts of evil acts. Now, the ecclesiastical authorities, they lived a licentious, pleasurable life at the expense of the poor people. Church was the highest, let's say, feudal landowner in Europe. And they got most of the produce of the land. And that is one of the reasons why there was French Revolution. And even today's Pope says that 5% of all popes are pedophiles. Imagine the number of the millions of children who lost their normal life because of these priests. Many of the priests and pontiffs and higher ecclesiastical authorities of that time were licentious, womanizers. Many popes had their own keeps. Some of the popes made their illegitimate child the next pope. Some others, like Julius II, had a sexual relationship with his illegitimate daughter. And sometime the Vatican Palace was a den of harlots and there were orgies. So this is, one story of the entire church which is supposed to have been established by this Yeshua. And in another, side of the story, ever since it got established, it fragmented. You find the Pontiac or the Pope of Rome excommunicating the Patriarch of Antioch, and Antioch Patriarch in return excommunicating Pope. It goes on like that. And later on, Luther, burns the papal bull which said, which was to collect money for the construction of St. Peter's Basilica by selling indulgences. So Lutheran church forms. We find Calvin again disagreeing with the Pope and a number of edicts, Calvinism. We find in England, the king totally cedes with the Pope and the England or the Church of England gets formed. We find Protestants, Catholics, there are hundreds of warring denominations now fighting each other. Remember the Protestant Catholic wars. Remember all the other, wars, sectarian wars that have taken place. So, the history of the church, we do not find any divine hands behind that. It fragmented, it has made evils, it has made all sins possible. So, where is divine hands guiding it at all? And today, most of the people who are believing or who were believers, they are deserting Catholicism and Christianity. And then you may ask, what about the God? It is funny to talk about the Jewish God, who is now the Almighty God of Christians. Yahweh was actually a Middle Eastern war and mountain god, a mountain deity who migrated to the cluster of Ei gods of Palestine, and some way or other he got into the charge of the Jews. And he ruled them with a lot of, let's say, selfishness. And this God, his prophets, drunken prophets most of the time, they made him powerful, they made him almighty, they made him the God of all the universe, and he slowly becomes evolved into an almighty. Now, if we look into the Old Testament, we will find that this God is always angry, revengeful, envious, a monster. If he didn't like somebody, or if somebody did not follow what he did, what he said exactly, he murdered them. Either he directly murdered or he sent somebody else, he murdered. He used to send, fire, rain. Otherwise he would send big floods to destroy the entire human race. What more, demonish act do you want? He's not loving. In no way is he loving. The entire humans, ever since they were created, were in pain, poverty, pestilences, pain, diseases. Hundreds of diseases, are following them today, even today or yesterday or, hundreds of years or thousands of years back. They all died. Now there are, let's say, very dangerous viruses like corona. Remember the European plague, which killed half of Europe. There are so many other viruses, AIDS, the pine, there are so many other, let's say, very dangerous viruses which have attacked and killed humans. We do not find any God coming to their help. Even now, most of the humans are in misery, abject poverty. Even when we talk now, children are dying without food, without water to drink. Which God is helping them? There is a lot of wealth, let's say, accumulated in the vaults of Vatican. Millions of tons of gold. They do not part with them. Church is the biggest corporation in the world, earning money. Their product is God, which production cost is zero, and they have got a lot of revenue, and the entire revenue is a profit. Every Catholic, has to pay to the church from the time he is born to the time he dies. And many of them have told me it is actually really feeling very bad to be in this organization, because money is all that matters. So we find that even the God's church is after money. God is not helping the poor. There has been, floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, every sort of pestilence, famines, you name it. Natural calamities have been there, which, obliterated human races. Part of human race, wherever it came. Smallpox virus, smallpox disease, for example. Where did God come with any help? So we find absolutely no help, no interference from God at all. So why should we believe in such a creature who does not help human beings at all? The Catechism of the Catholic Church says that we are created to know Him, to obey His commandments, and to get on with this heaven and live with Him forever. But how many can know Him? How many can keep His commandments? Half of all the children born have died. Half of all people who are born have died as children. They could not use their free will. There are the mad, the psychotic, the feeble-minded. They cannot know God or His commandments. So how do they do good and attain heaven? If God is giving all of these categories heaven, why not He give all of them, all people, humans, heaven, and there's no need for a religion here. But He doesn't seem to do that. He gives them, pain, suffering. Some of the children, some of the people born are born with criminal mind. Some are born with, let's say, philanthropic, helping mind. Some children are born in as offspring of criminals. Some others are born as children of good people. These two groups cannot be expected to do right and wrong in the same way. God is just leaving them to chance. Whatever happens, happens. So why should we believe in such a guy? In the Old Testament or in the Bible, nobody can believe in that God. He's a monster, a demon, who has killed even, enemy soldiers by, rolling stones from heaven. As soldiers used to park, He will roll the stone one by one and kill them. Or He will send fire, rain. This sort of a God who wants to believe. And if we say that this God is, not at all interfering like a Nirguna Brahma of Hinduism, I have no problem to accept. That seems to be more reasonable. Otherwise, as the science today says, the entire energy in the world is same. There's no need for a creator. It has been there, it will be there, it's not going anywhere. So if somebody says the God is cosmos, as Hindus believe, I have no problem to accept. But not the Catholic God, not a separate loving God who is interested in humans. That is nonsense, and all the things which I just now told you make me not believe in Christianity at all. Thank you.